now begin the part of the De Bello Gallico in Book 6, in which Caesar is going to discuss the customs and other aspects of Gallic culture, and especially some of the social classes, of which there are three, one of which he dismisses, but then you have two, which he starts out with here. In all Gaul, in omni Gallia, genera sunt duo. There are two types. Genera comes from genus, generis, which remember is a type, not gens, gentis, which is a race, although sometimes the words are interchangeable. So there are two types, eorum hominum, of men. Now remember, eorum is from Isaian, would normally mean of them, but when it's modifying something, you will have it as the equivalency of hic, hoc, this or these, or leolalud, that or those. I'll choose those. In all Gaul, there are two types of those men who are aliquos modifying numero atque honore, who are with, as a sort of ablative of description, some, remember the aliquis is someone, anyone, and so here as it's modifying numero, you just translate it as some, who are with some number and honor. In other words, that matter, are important. Nam, for the plebes, the common people, they almost, paine, are held, are considered, it is passive and present, in the place of slaves. So the common people have no standing in society. The common folk, plebes, who dare, audet is a semi-deponent verb. By that, it is going to have in the present, imperfect, and future forms, present, or I should say active form and active meaning, but in the pluperfect, perfect, and future perfect, it has passive forms. So here, present, it is going to have an active form. So, who dare nothing through themselves, in other words, on their own, and who are called to, who are invited, who are involved in no plan. So in other words, the decision-making of society they are left out completely. And generally, plerique, generally, when out, either or. And so we go and find our verb and subject, and there's ours. When they are pressed either by foreign, alien bronze. Foreign bronze or alien bronze is bronze of someone else. That means debt. So this is an idiom that means debt. So when they are oppressed either by bronze or by a hugeness, a magnitude of tax burden, tributorum, so we get the word tribute, or the injury, injuria, of the more powerful, in other words, they have offended someone of a better status than them, or harmed them, they dicat. Now this is not the verb that means to say. This is the verb dico dicare, which means to assign. So they assign themselves into servitude, slavery. So essentially, if ever they're in debt, or they have a big tax burden, or if they have done something that they now owe somebody retribute because they're more powerful, then they're going to just simply put themselves into slavery and pay it off like an indentured servant. And they do this to the nobles, for whom, date of case, there are all the same rights against these guys. So the people who have sold themselves into indentured servitude to pay off something, there are all the same rights against these guys, which are for masters against slaves. So if you sell yourself into indentured servitude, you are going to be treated and considered just like a slave, even though technically you are not, as a plebis. Continuing on. Said, but, so he immediately dismisses the common people, because they are absolutely of no account in society. But concerning these two types, alterum, and then we have alterum. So when you have two alterum, you don't start out with another, one, and then another. One is of the Druids, this of course is genitive plural, the other of the Equites. Now Equites is a technical term in Roman society that indicates at the time of Caesar somebody who has of a certain amount of money. I think it's like 400,000 sesterces. It'd be like $1 million essentially. In the early days of Rome, an eques singular, so the singular would look like this. Oh, there it is. Singular is eques, and then the genitive, equitis, so if I make it plural, it's equites. Originally, they were of the people who had enough money that they could supply a horse to the Roman army as a part of the cavalry. And so, over time, that sort of obligation was obviously fell by the wayside, but the term for those that have a certain amount of money is kept in. And so, essentially, the equites are the social class that have just as much money as a senator. But to be a senator, you could not technically be in the equites class. You had to give that up and then become just a simple farmer. So, for example, in the story of Ecce Romani, Cornelius is a senator, but if his son Marcus grows up and doesn't become a senator, he will still have the money to be an eques, as it were. So it's essentially like the business class, loosely translated. So nevertheless, the other is of the equites. Those guys, now we're talking about the Druids. So those guys intersunt. That means are in charge of, essentially, divine matters. And procurant, they handle, they take care of public and private sacrifices. And they interpret, this is a deponent verb, the religion. So it is through this class, the Druids, that are essentially going to be controlling the people via religion. Ad hos magnus adolescentium numerus. So to these guys, again the Druids, like the priest class, a large number of adolescents, of young men, they run to these guys, causa disciplinae, for the sake of learning. Remember that causa ingratia can mean for the sake of. And so they want to become a part of this class, the power that they hold. Magno quae, and these guys, the Druids, are among them, among the people, magno honore, with great honor. And so that's why so many people want to become a Druid. But as we're going to learn later on, it ain't easy to become a Druid. Otherwise, lots of people would. Nevertheless, 4, almost concerning all, fere, meaning almost, concerning all controversies, public and private, they decide. So not only are they in charge of the religion, they're in charge of, obviously, kind of like legal matters. And if si nisi numine, all the allies fall away, this would be quoted. If something, est admissum is together, has been, instead of admissum, think of it as being commissum. And you learn that it comes from committo, committed. If something, and it's some crime, facinus, facinoris, if some crime has been committed, if a slaughter, caides, caedus, facta, and imply an est, has been done, and if there is controversy concerning an inheritance, heredity, or if there's a controversy concerning borders, as in like a border dispute, like, no, the property line is there. No, it's not. Edom, these same ones. Is-ed with a D-E-M is going to be the same. These same guys, they discern, they decide. And they decide the rewards and the penalties. So you can see why it would be such an attractive position to be among this class of Druids. They truly are at the peak and the top of society, and that's why so many people want to be among them. Because again, they not only control the religion, they also control disputes, like if there's a suit to be brought up in court, if there's a crime committed, they're the ones that decide, they're the judge and the jury. If there is a murder, if there's a dispute as to who inherits what or borders, it is these Druids that obviously are the ones who are deciding it all. And if somebody, si nisi numine, all the allies fall away. Remember, aliqui. If somebody, either a private citizen or in public, a public citizen, has not stood in the decree of them, so either if they say, I'm going to do what they say, those Druids, and if you do it in the private of your own home, or if you do it out in the open, in the public. So if private or public, somebody has not stood in the decree of them, they, meaning the Druids, cut them off, they interdict them from the sacrifices. In other words, they excommunicate them. They don't allow them to take part in the religious rites and the like. Haikpoina, this penalty is very serious. Gravissima among them. It is bad news to be kicked out of religious practices. And for whom, in such a way, it has been cut off, in other words, this ability to take part, these guys are held, are considered in the number of impious, that meaning unholy, and of the wicked. So everybody considers, what? So-and-so is excommunicated? He must be evil, must be wicked. And all go away from these guys. So somebody who's been interdicted because they didn't go along with what the Druid says and they can't obviously participate in the religion, you're walking down the street, that's that guy that was cut off, and you just go to the other side of the street. You don't want any part of them. They flee their approach and their speech. So, again, you see somebody coming down the street that's been interdicted, you leave. They say, hey, what's going on? I'm your neighbor. You don't even acknowledge them. That's the kind of penalty of society brings. And they do this, they flee, they go away from them, lest, so that not, a negative purpose clause, so that they not receive anything, si, nisi, num, and ne, all the allies fall away, lest they accept anything of inconvenience, in other words, the bad luck, the bad curse, the being associated with somebody interdicted, from contact. That's why diseases are contagious. It is from contact, as it were. And not, neither nor. And neither is use, right, justice, we would call it due process. Neither is justice returned to these guys seeking it. So the ones who have been interdicted, who have been cut off, if something bad happens to them and they want to get justice, they don't get due process. They don't get the same treatment as others do. Nor is any honor communicated to them. In other words, bestowed upon them. It is the worst thing that could happen to someone to be cut off by the Druids. And how does this happen? By not going along with what the Druids say. However, one guy, prae est. Now, est is, prae means in charge of. One guy is in charge, and it takes a dative. One guy is in charge of all the Druids. Omnibus his Druidibus. He's like the chief Druid, the Grand Poobah, who has the highest authority among them. So you have all the Druids, but then you got Chief Druid, top dog Druid. And so Caesar then immediately is going to address as to how or what you are going to determine concerning old top Druid when he dies. Ablative absolute. With this guy, meaning the top Druid, having died, perfect passive looking participle form, morior, mori, mortuus, sum, with this guy dead, with this guy having died, either if someone, si, nisi, numen, ne, all the allies fall away, aliquis, aliquid, someone, something, anyone, anything, and if anybody out of the remaining ones, meaning the remaining Druids, excels in his dignity, then that guy succeeds him. He takes his place. Or, if there are many more, it's of course comparative, if more are equal, so in other words, if there's not really one guy that's obvious going to be the next top Druid, by a vote of the Druids does he succeed. And so therefore they have a vote, just in the same way that the College of Cardinals vote on the Pope. And that's where we get, of course, the suffragium is a vote. That's where we get the word suffrage. And non nunquam, not never, sometimes even, they fight, they contend with weapons concerning the top spot. So sometimes they actually have a battle royale. These guys, meaning these Druids, so he keeps talking about these Druids, incredibly important part of the Gallic culture. In a certain time of the year, they sit down in the borders of the Carnutes. Remember that when it is a third declension, you will refer to this tribe with a third declension ending, always with the nominative. So, these guys in a certain time of year, they sit down, they come together. They don't literally sit down, but they all join up in the borders of the Carnutes in a consecrated, a holy spot. Which region, so we're talking about the borders of the Carnutes, which region, remember, regio, it's nominative. If you stick an N on the end of a Latin word that ends with a long O, and it makes an English word, that's nominative. Which region is considered the middle of all Gaul, naughty 9, genitive, singular. To this place, on all sides, they come together. They who have disputes. So if you know that all the Druids are meeting in this one spot, that'd be the perfect place for you to go if you've got a problem with your neighbor, a border dispute. He says the property line is by the mailbox, but you say that it's by the telephone pole. Well, you got to go get the Druids to decide. Well, how can you track down a Druid? You know where they're going to be at a certain time of the year. They come together, they who have disagreements, and they obey the parent, pareo, parere, and this verb pareo is one of those verbs that take a dative. They obey the decrees and the judgments of them. So they obviously go along with it. The discipline, the learning, the knowledge. Reperta existimator. The knowledge, having been discovered, reperio, reperire, means to find or discover. So the knowledge, having been discovered in Britain, so the whole idea of being a Druid and the Druid belief system originated in Britain apparently. And Inde, from there, it is thought to have been brought, Pharaoh Feri Telilatus, across into Gaul. A perfect passive infinitive, translated to have been verbed when it is not in indirect statement. So they think that the whole idea of being a Druid, all that goes along with it, having been discovered in Britain, and from there Britain is thought to have been brought across into Gaul. And now, those who want to learn this thing, this Druid way, more diligently, generally, plerumque, they set out to that place, meaning Britain, for the sake of learning. A gerund, because it's not modifying anything. So, if you want to go and, in our society, let's say you want to be a priest, you go to seminary. If you want to be a Druid, you got to go to where Druidic stuff began, which is in Britain. And in the next chapter, we will continue.